by bassist Steve Harris, Iron Maiden were a driven and ambitious young band, determined to make their mark.
Steve used to come to my house and rehearse, and it was quite self-evident that the boy had direction. You know, he knew exactly where he was going to go. I don't think he probably knew the size that they are now, but he certainly had that focused ideology of what Iron Maiden was about and what the music should sound like and who they were. And to the point that he used to come to my house and we'd go through the bass and drum parts and all that kind of thing to get everything right. And I mean, at that time, the band didn't actually particularly mean anything. It was just another band that was trying to push the frontiers a little bit.
Maiden were not alone. And new bands intent on injecting a new heaviness into hard rock were emerging across the country. In 1976, Son of a Bitch, the band who would become Saxon, formed in Barnsley, and in Stourbridge in the Midlands, school friends Brian Tatler and Duncan Scott formed Diamond Head.
We didn't have any gigs or anything, so we just thought, write songs, practice, you know, in the bedroom, and just see how it goes from there. And eventually we got a bass player and started doing gigs. But initially, I think we're more interested in writing. I don't know why exactly. But I'm glad we did, because we learnt our craft, you know. But just recording straight onto cassette and listening back and thinking, that's not right. Analysing the arrangements, really. And we did, you know, a lot of that. We went to see Led Zeppelin, 3 out of the 4 members of the band, and we all, you know, sat in this, you know, 100,000 people watching Led Zeppelin. And you know, you probably think, oh, it'd be great to be Led Zeppelin, wouldn't it? You know, it'd be great to be this big, wouldn't it? As we'll go back and play the Crispin in Stourbridge and dream about being as big as Led Zeppelin.
Yet while these new heavy metal bands were honing their craft, there would be a seismic cultural shift in the world of music, a mid-70s revolution that would briefly put other genres out of favour. Punk rock exploded and captured the attention of the public in an unprecedented manner, a situation that would not be to everyone's liking.
My generation had enjoyed the 60s. Then we enjoyed the late 60s into the early 70s when we had this sort of progressive rock stuff around, and the blues side, rock and roll side covered. And then things suddenly seemed to drop off, dissipate. What we came up against was this thing called punk, you see, which was, to me, in my way of feeling, like a sort of an anti-human passion.
I was completely bemused by it, actually, to be honest with you. You know, while Babylon was burning, the Sounds office was literally a stone's throw from the Roxy Club, you know, where the Clash and the Pistols would play on a regular basis. I mean, I was just sitting in my little corner listening to Ted Nugent and Kiss and Aerosmith, you know. So I was kind of a bit of, I suppose, in retrospect, a bit of a pariah.
I couldn't understand the reason for devaluing music. That is, to me, what it was. It was a devaluation in cause of a fashion. That's, to me, what it was. And it was like a shock fashion as well. You know, the more you curse on radio and television when you do get interviewed, the better it is for you. But actually, that's usurping the media for me. I think music is the thing that mattered. And I think excellence within the field is to me what it's all about. I don't believe that you have the right to stand on stage unless you can play right and sing to the nth degree.
Although punk antagonised many in the established rock community, both through its radical philosophy and its dismissal of many of the scene's heroes as obsolete dinosaurs, it was nevertheless an important movement for many of the younger British rock bands. The independent DIY atmosphere that punk had introduced into an increasingly commercial music industry was vital to the eventual success of the new wave of British heavy metal. And unlike funk and later disco, musically it had much in common with heavy rock.
I could appreciate what punk was doing. I liked, you know, several of the punk rock bands, and you know, that you'd put singles out and they'd be on top of the pops and things. It was either good music or bad music type thing. I didn't necessarily say they're punk rock, I don't like them.
My thoughts on punk were that I was always willing to give anything a chance, because I've always liked to consider myself as being open-minded musician, more than just a drummer. I like to consider myself as a musician. And as a musician, you're always willing to take on anything that shapes what you do. So yes, I loved the energy. I loved the brutalness of punk, and I, like anybody else, went out and bought Never Mind the Bollocks, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
There is an argument to say that all punk was heavy metal played badly. Now, quite frankly, the first Sex Pistols album is one of the great heavy metal albums of all time. You know, now there are going, you know, well, there will be old NME journalists that won't watch this, but if they were to hear that, would be sticking their fingers down their throat or be up in arms. But quite frankly, Steve Jones is a brilliant riff guitarist, right? He's a brilliant heavy metal riff guitar player. And the first Sex Pistols album, Never Mind the Bollocks, is a brilliant heavy metal album with a little Herbert with spots and green teeth and red hair screaming his head off over the top of it. A vocal approach that would be appropriated by millions of heavy metal bands about 10 years down the line. The links between proper punk and heavy metal are very, very close, because musically it's almost the same thing.
Punk had the attitude, anyone can get up and play it. It's only 3 chords. It's not rocket science. And the sophistication of the progressive rock dinosaurs really is irrelevant to us. If you can go out and get a guitar and you can stand in a local pub, do it. And I think that's absolutely crucial to what happened in 1976-77, when you had the formation of Iron Maiden and Def Leppard and Diamond Head and Saxon, although they were called Son of a Bitch at the time. And that's the thing people forget, is that Iron Maiden didn't start in 1979. They started 2 or 3 years earlier. So did Leppard, so did Saxon, so did Diamond Head. All those crucial bands to the new wave of British heavy metal were happening at the time that the punk explosion went on. And what made them, I think, part of the punk movement, although separate, was the fact that they were getting up and playing in pubs. They were getting up in clubs, in church halls, and playing wherever they possibly could. And whilst I don't think they were getting involved in the socio-political anarchy and confrontation that defined so much of punk, they picked up on the energy and picked up on the DIY ethic and got in their vans and drove around the country and basically said, well, we've seen our heroes on stage, we want to emulate them, but we feel we can. And it actually, punk empowered those bands to do what they did. And I've got no doubt, had punk not happened, that these bands would never have come out and had that drive and inspiration and energy to do what they did.
And in a new climate in which established rock outfits like Zeppelin and Deep Purple were now considered passé, it meant that the younger rock bands like Maiden were having to fight to get their music heard.
It had all gone back underground again. Like I say, I mean, it just seems ridiculous if you put it on paper. 5 years after, you know, the biggest rock bands we've ever heard about have sort of got together, that, you know, they're being discarded. But it was enough for young blokes to think, fuck that, I can do better, or we can do something else. And, you know, it's back down from Earl's Court, back down to, you know, a pub in Stratford.
The first time I saw Iron Maiden,